Okay, we left. We were talking about preparing to plant for a hole and getting in the hole, and the last part we didn't talk about.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about is mulch, and a question came up about mulching, and I appreciate that, about the rubber mulch or whatever. One of the things that when you mulch, you never ever want to do this. See this volcano?
Yeah.
All right, and the reason you don't want to do that is right here. Remember the tree flare is all the way down here, where it touches the soil line. And you can look over here on this tree over here, and you can see part of that flare. That's where the tree is starting to go out like that. That's called the flare. And what will happen is if you mount it up like this, you'll have problems with voles and voles and mice tunneling into this wood chips, and they'll start chewing and eating that, and they'll actually girdle that tree right there at the root flare. And what happens when you girdle it? How much living tissue is on that plant? Does anybody know? Have you ever looked at it?
Around the outside.
Okay. I'm going to trim off a piece of this, and I'm going to basically the xylem and phloem layer is very, very shallow, and the smaller the twig it is, the smaller thickness it is on smaller twigs. But the tree right there, it probably is less than 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so if they actually go all the way around, up to that 1/8 of an inch and cut through it, then it'll kill the tree. That's all it takes. So that's why you don't want to have. That's why we mulch. That's one reason we mulch is to keep people that have weed eaters away from that part, the critical part of the tree, that flare. So that they don't take that weed whacker and actually slice into the tree. So I'm going to try to slice into this. Okay, just pass that around. So basically, yes ma'am.
So if we cut down a mimosa tree that's in the way and has a little stump, and we go through and peel the bark off the edge of it all the way around, that'll make it where it does, and we'll send up 5,000?
No, it'll send up 5,000. It'll send up those 5,000. They call their suckers, but it'll come from below that. It won't come from above. It'll come from below. And so what's happened is that's the tree's response to, hey, I've been damaged. Okay, and we'll talk about some suckers here in a few minutes. Yes.
So the question about the mulching. So how long does it take for someone for the sides to start presenting themselves that there's damage being done? So like my next door neighbor does that to like all of his pine trees. He's been living there for 30 years. He's been doing that for at least.
Okay, that's a good question, and it doesn't mean that they absolutely will, but it opens it up for the possibility. Okay. Also, diseases, fungus, and stuff like that can get in that area. Remember, the trunk is alive, and so it all breathes. It's a breathing. It's not an animal, but it's a plant. But the whole thing respires. It gives off carbon dioxide at night, and it respires in the day. It gives off oxygen during the day.
Wasn't there something about roots come up too?
That's right. That's exactly right. And when you have a real thick layer of mulch, it promotes root growth in the mulch layer. So you don't want to have anything over 2 inches thick. And so that's really what they're doing. If you look at the picture over here on the left, you can see how far it's about 10 feet out. And what they do is it's right next to the tree. It's not even a half an inch. It's just barely enough to cover that root right around the stump itself, and then it goes out like that. Okay. So different types of materials, obviously leaf litter. I love leaf litter, but what I do is I use my leaf litter making compost, because what I end up doing is I've got all these other stuff and I need to add some browns to it. So I take all my leaves that I've collected and I throw that in. So every year I don't have enough leaf litter to be able to from year to year to, I actually steal people's grass clippings and stuff off the side of the road, and that could be where some of that those noxious weeds came. Like compost, right? Okay. All right. Guilty. Okay. When we're talking about staking and guide, I won't spend a lot of time on this. When you have bare root, you can actually use a stake, one single stake right next to the plant, and basically you're just holding it up. And you don't want to put a lot of pressure. You want to make the tree itself stand on its own. So you're not tightening these guy wires. You see these guy wires that are really tight. People put wire through a hose and they put it 3 different ways and they tighten it down. That's making the tree weaker, simply because it's not having to sway in the wind and build its own strength. So that's really what you're after. You only want to leave these things on for no more than a year. If you're going to use a 2-stake method, about 2 feet out from the tree itself, you put a stake on the windward side, meaning where the wind blows and hits it, and then you put one the opposite the windward side. And then what you'll do is you'll put a guy wire hook like this, and another guy wire hook like this, so that it's around and it's not really tight, okay, so that it can literally sway, okay, as the wind blows. And then the 3 staking system, it's kind of the same way. It's in 3 locations. And the only time you really want to use these is when you've got a big tree that cannot stand on its own. A ball of burlap would be a good example, because remember, a tree like that, it's got a ball mass like that, and with all that leaf material will catch the wind. Okay, so in that instance, I probably would put a 3 on this guy for a temporary period, 6 months, 8 months, and I would just evaluate it. Every time I'd go by it, I'd look at it. We've just recently moved into a new building, and I'm embarrassed because the landscapers, they came and they planted our plants, and we had some input, and then they didn't water them. Okay, so an ag center that has dead trees out front, now they're guaranteed for a year, so they've got to come back and replant them. So we can't really do anything until they come back. But I've got at least 3 dead trees, American hollies that are dead in the shrubs. They put these big water tanks like this green one out here. It's 1,200 gallons on both sides of the building. But when they put the building in, they didn't put any valves in it, so I can't get the water. I can't tap into it. I can't turn on, can't use it to water. So the water's going right in the sinks, the storm drain. So they're working to fix some of those things slowly, but at some point we're going to be able to have our reign with the building and as the master gardener. But anyway, they have some trees like this that are guyed up, 3, and the trees are dead, but you want to use a material that is like a tape. And again, the most important thing is that there's no pressure from the stake to that it's not tight like a tent line. Trunk wraps. This is not something that you typically, yes ma'am?
Sorry, back to staking. Is it okay I get a stake, a plant that's kind of leaning towards the right in order to help it while it's still young and be straighter?
Okay, well, that's a real good question. You're not going to defeat, if it's after the sunlight, you're not going to defeat it. Either move the tree, if it's really bothering you, move the tree, but it's not going to help it. That's exactly like, I'll show you, I found it a little bit later on, I'll show you that persimmon that I've got where it's leaning. But this trunk wraps, this is not recommended. If you are if you've got apple trees or something like that, where you are spraying underneath, with pesticides, in that instance, the tree wrap may be advantageous, but it's not, it actually can become more harmful to it than really the good that it provides. Again, good mulching on the outside to keeping the critters away and the weed whacker away will do much more for it than what this wrapping does. Okay. Before, they're recommended that you don't, you can amend the area as a whole before you plant, but then when you do plant, they're recommended that no, you don't really want to use, you want to use a soil sample before apply any kind of fertilizer, and that's our mantra in extension: soil sample, soil sample, soil sample. Okay, but if you're gonna, no, I'm just kidding. They recommend that you don't add this fertilizer because the tree itself will do okay to get established. That's what you're primarily trying to do. And then the recommendation, again, like we talked about, is to fertilize in the following. If you plant in the spring, then you can apply a little bit of fertilizer in the fall, or if you plant in the fall, in the spring, then you can give it a little bit of a shot of fertilizer. The tree stakes, the spikes, avoid those. They're only applying the fertilizer in a small area, and they don't do a really good job. This picture is showing the deficiency in nitrogen deficiency. There's not much to talk about here. Okay, watering. How much water do you need to provide for plants, for any garden? How much? You got an idea? 1 inch per week. 1 inch per week. And that's great. So, and some gardens you'll need more, some you need less. During the heat of the summer, you may need more. It depends on your soil type, right? We talked about, if you've got clay soils, you may not need to water as often or as much. How much water does it, okay, for 1 square foot, okay, how much water is provided in 1 gallon? Any idea? Basically, that's about 321 square inches, cubic inches per gallon of water. Okay, so basically, what you need about 3 gallons of water, okay, per foot that you want to go down. So if you wanted to, for 1 square foot. So for example, if you've got a 5 foot by 5 foot, it's kind of your planting bed, and you want to water deep, okay, you need to take 3 gallons per times 5, okay? And that's how much water you need to apply in that small space to get you that 1 inch water 12 inches deep, okay? Does that make sense? Go to the book, take a look at it. It explains that in great detail. Okay, have you ever seen a tree that looked like this?
Yes.
Okay, and a lot of people would suspect that there's a problem because the tree is actually responding to a problem. And so what it does is it starts at the tips and then it works its way back and it tries to get closer and closer, and then as a last ditch effort, those little dormant buds actually bud out and actually put out growth, and that's what you're seeing here. So this is actually caused by root damage in this tree. This is another example of that. My next door neighbor has a dogwood, and it's doing exactly this. Now, I don't know what kind of problem it is, but I've noticed it in my dogwood as well. So whatever it is, we're having a problem with dogwoods in our neighborhood, and some kind of a fungal pathogen that's out there, and I'm just not sure what it is. Okay, this is Crepe Myrtle. Okay, you'll take a look and you can see these are called water sprouts. Okay, and why do you think that's happening? If you'll notice, there is a cut right here. Can you see that cut? Okay, that is about the same size as this. Okay, and frankly, what I was doing was that tree that we showed you with the power line, that's that tree. Okay, I went in and took out some of the major trunk, okay, so that I could get it down. And so this is that response to that. This was actually 2 trees, and they've actually grown together. And so I really would have liked to take it a little bit lower to get that out, but I couldn't. I'm more concerned about damaging the tree. When you look at doing pruning work, you sometimes need to look at it in the long term as opposed to short term. I wanted to give you an example. I told you I would tell you about a call that I came out on from an HOA in Chapel Hill. They had Crepe Myrtle out. They said, I've got a problem with my Crepe Myrtle. And it seems to be affecting not only my tree, but my neighbors. And I said, well, sure, I'll come out and take a look. And what had happened is the whole neighborhood had the same lawn service as part of the HOA. And the lawn service came out and they pruned the Crepe Myrtles. What happens when you have a tree that's under stress is it produces a chemical called ethylene. And ethylene is an alcohol. That alcohol attracts something called the green emerald ash borer. And what had happened was the ash borer came into that community, and every single one of those Crepe Myrtles that they had pruned were infested with the emerald ash borer. I walked around from the whole cul-de-sac and looked at every single Crepe Myrtle that was in there. And what happened was there was one house that didn't have any damage. And so I was really curious as why this house didn't have any damage. Well, this gentleman refused to let the pruners, the landscaping company, prune his, because they were his house was in a U shape, and the plants were a small compact form, and they were up inside the U channel. So technically they had to respect it. Those are the only two trees that were not hit by emerald ash borer. Now, why are emerald ash borers so bad? Well, they carry a fungus that they use to colonate. When they bore into the tree, they basically inject this fungus, and this fungus is what they eat, they consume. Well, the fungus will kill the tree. Regardless, it will kill the tree. You can kill the ash borer, but the tree is going to die because of this fungus that they have injected into it. So every one of the trees in the whole community, Crepe Myrtles that have been pruned, died. The way you can tell emerald ash borer, they leave something that's called a toothpick. As they bore in, they excrete, and it pushes out what looks like a toothpick out of the tree. So anyway, just thought that pass that along to you. Okay, this is just another picture. As you can see, the scale and stuff of the bark. That's a beautiful interest in the winter. But then again, okay. As we talk about pruning, when we talk about pruning evergreens, I wanted you to take a look at this. This is that cryptomeria. Remember where you saw the light pole? And this is that area that I actually went in and pruned. And what I was trying to do was to create a shade garden underneath the cryptomeria. I wanted to put in hostas that are shade lovers, and also wanted to try to push back the cryptomeria a little bit back. But also I didn't want to leave a real nasty hole. So certain evergreens you can only clip back to the green. If you clip past the green, if you prune past the green, it won't recover. So if you'll look, this is new growth. You've got new growth here, okay? And then back over here, you can see there's where this one's been pruned, there's nothing coming. Over here, there's nothing growing here. So that's really what I'm trying to show you in that picture. Okay, again, another picture. Okay, this is that grandiflora, Magnolia grandiflora. As you can see, there's some damage here. Okay, at some point, I suspect this tree is going to come down. What do you see over here? I don't know if you see what is that? Anybody know?
We do.
Sap suckers. Yeah. What they do is they come and you say, oh my gosh, I've got insects in my tree. Well, no. Technically not. What happens is they come and they drill holes like that. It makes the bark bleed, and so as it bleeds, insects come to it, and then the sap suckers come back and they eat the insects. So I've got some really interesting pictures that at some point I can show you, but I don't have it in this slideshow. Those are the two grandiflora magnolia that came off that other picture. The sprouts, the water sprouts, that I actually am trying to regrow those so that I can sell those at one of our plant sales. Okay, why do we prune? Anybody?
Air.
Okay, air circulation. What else? Rejuvenate, revigorate the plant. What else?
Safety. It's an extra
Safety. Okay, fantastic. Okay, what else?
Shape
Shape, okay. Aesthetics, okay.
Light in a little more light.
Okay, more light penetration, air penetration, okay, very good. All these are reasons to improve the aesthetics, for safety, to control the growth and size. I had a phone call of a client that said, hey, I know it's in the middle of the summer, I've got this huge fig tree that my neighbor tells me I need to prune, but I'm telling him I can't prune it because it's in the middle of summer. So I'm calling you. You're going to be our determining factor. He'll believe me whatever you tell me. And so I started asking a few questions. Well, how big is it? Is it producing fruit? Is it, why does your neighbor want to prune it? And he said, well, because he can't see can't see the stop sign. And I said, cut the thing down. Because if you've ever got a problem where it is a safety hazard, you need to prune, you need to do something right away. Don't wait for the right season, okay? If you have a safety issue, cut it, okay? Doesn't matter what the season is, take care of the safety aspect first. Let's see. Oh, and by the way, that was at that stop sign was right by the bus stop. So people come flying through there, they couldn't see past it, so it was really a bad area. Sometimes when you prune, you want to look at the footprint of whatever you're pruning. This plant is a Spirea, and if you'll look how many different shoots there are. This Spirea has probably only been in the ground about, I think this is the second year. So it's really expanded out there. So what I need to do at some point is I need to go in there and prune it. So when would I prune the Spirea? Anybody know? Okay. All right. I see somebody pulled it out. Okay. How to prune specific plants, or when to prune. How and when. I'm going to show you a little bit about that here in a few minutes. It's available online. We'll talk about references here in a few minutes. But this thing is a fabulous, fabulous resource. Why would I not want to prune a Spirea now? Any idea?
Is it setting buds for next year?
All right, fantastic. All right, let's see. I've got a Spirea here. And I'm just going to pass this thing around. And if I were to prune that, well, let me there. And what you're looking for, you're looking at the buds. It's already setting buds. And if I were to prune that thing now, it would definitely cut off. It would have no flowers. What other plants are like that? Huh? Azalea, okay. I actually looked at my azaleas. I've got some that are different, that are a little bit different. They're late blooming, so they have not started setting buds. This is a Forsythia. Take a look at that. If I were to prune that, I would have no yellow flowers. And I broke that. When does Forsythia bloom? Early spring, that's right. So if I were to prune my Forsythia, I would have no blooms whatsoever. I'm just gonna hawk our orange gardener. Now I know y'all probably have something similar to this, but if you ever, please go here and look. If you click on theorangegardener.org, go to Ornamentals, for every month that's here, there is a maintenance. There's a maintenance slide, when you do something, okay? You can click on lawns. It talks about when you fertilize, it gives you those maintenance calendars. It's one easy source. One of my master gardeners is doing this. There's monthly tips, soil moisture. There's a lot of information here. I'd love for you to go to the site. Okay, can anybody tell, I know it's kind of hard to see. This is an oak tree in my backyard. I've gotten a lot of problems, as you can tell. But look at the angle. This is two separate trees. It's the same tree. It splits right here. You see this? There is a lid that comes across here. And then, do you think this is a real strong tree?
No.
Okay, what's going to happen in the wind, if I have a really high windstorm, is this guy's probably going to split right down the middle. One's going to go one way and one's going to go the other. Look at this one. This is my biggest nemesis. That guy is this big around, okay? And look at these angles, okay? If you look, the angles are much too great to be a really healthy tree. We're going to talk about those here in a few minutes. I just wanted to point those out before we get to them. Okay, there are different types of pruning, okay? And you've got to kind of look at what your really objectives are to when you prune. If you're thinning or if you're going to do removal cuts, removal or taking out a lot of material. Okay, in a few minutes I'm going to pass around a couple of pruners when we start talking about that and let you actually start cutting some stuff to see what you feel like. Somebody asked me during the break is, do I have a preference in terms of pruners? And absolutely, everybody will have a different pruning or hand tool preference, okay? And the preferences just depends on you itself, is what feels good to you. One of the things that I talk about as we talk about pruning tools is selection, and if you have being able to replace it, being able to sharpen it, general maintenance with it, and what will it do. But anyway, we're going to talk more about that when we get to the tools. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the pruning cut. Okay, we've got heading cuts. What's a heading cut? Anybody know? Okay, basically you're topping it out, right? So if I'm heading, I'm taking off the terminal bud. I'm taking off the terminal portion of the tree. If I were to do a terminal cut on apple tree, what would happen? Would I have any apples? Yes or no? The answer is probably not, or not many. And the reason for that are apples actually produce their buds on the tips. Okay? So if you were to do a heading cut, of an apple tree, you're going to be removing those tips, those bud points where the apples are actually produced. So again, heading cut, knowing what you're doing, when to do it. Okay? Also, different types of cutting over here. I think we're pointing out the heading cut is basically just taking the tip off. You would do a heading cut whenever you do shrubs like boxwoods, where you're doing the shape real thin, small leaves, and you're using trimmers. Something like this. Or, electric saw. Other types of pruning, you would not really use something like this. You would want, or the electric, unless you're doing something like a heading in a formal garden. Reduction cuts. Okay, this actually looks pretty bad. It does, and if I can give you an example, how many of you know where Churton Street is in Hillsborough? Okay, as you drive from Churton Street from Weaver Street heading north up towards 86, you'll notice there are these trees. There are some dogwoods and there are some flowering cherry trees that go like this, and then there's a power line that runs right through it. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, that is a reduction cut. The arborists have come through there and they won't they could actually take those down. In my opinion, it would be better if they would just take them down and move them, put trees somewhere else. Right tree, right place. But unfortunately, they were put there and it's in the historic district, so they're not willing to remove them. So that they're spending lots of money to manage those. The arborists come in and they do a reduction cuts, bring it down so that the wires, it won't regrow, and then every year they're having to do a lot of maintenance on those. Okay, this is a heading cut versus a thinning reduction. We talked about the heading cut, you're just whacking off the terminal end. And then this is what it would look like, after, the second year. If you'll notice, there's a bud right here. That bud is actually sprouted, and then you've got a bud here that's flowered out. And then the first year, if you do this, okay, you're actually training. Okay, this is going to continue on. Okay, and then you've got a bud back down here. Okay, you see the difference?
No.
Okay, let me go back. Okay. All right, here's a bud right here. It's a bud right here, okay? That's this new growth here.
Okay.
Okay, if I cut it off here, there's a bud, a small bud right here, and that bud is going to leaf out. Okay? Now, as opposed to this, I'm taking it all the way back to this branch. A reduction down here, I'm taking it back to here.
Okay.
Okay? Now, what I've got is I don't have anything, because I've removed this bud here, I won't have this. Okay? I've got the one from here.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So it'll get taller and not.
That's right, and that's exactly what you're after when you do when you prune, is you want to create. You want in your mind that beautiful bonsai tree. You want that perfect shape. You want the pruning to go. You want the tree or shrub to go where you want it to. And we talk about safety as we remove limbs and stuff. We don't want to have things like plants that grow down where you ride the mower and then will poke you in the eye, right? So what you do is you train your tree to go up instead of to go down. And I can show you that here in a few minutes on this tree over here. Okay, this is that Oriental persimmon that I was telling you about. Remember I told you it was leaning? You can see that. When there are different types of pruning that you do on a persimmon versus an apple versus a peach. Peach tree, you have an open center. It looks like a vase, okay, but you have an open center. And what you're doing is you're trying to let the sunlight in on a peach tree. So you want it to look like this, an open center, okay? When you have a central leader, if you're trying to have like a shade tree, that would be like a central leader. Okay, now certain types of trees, you want to have a modified open center. And this is one of those. Okay, I know that's getting really deep, but the point I was trying to make is, I'm in the process of trying to train this one. When the tree starts growing, when you start whacking, the first time you start whacking it, the limbs, if I whack the limbs off, they're not going to continue to grow up. The limbs on the tree, when they start growing, wherever they come out, that's where they stay. They don't grow any higher. Okay? So if I were to go over here to this tree, if I take this limb off, then that limb's not going to come back. Okay? Unless there's a bud on it. If I take it back, I can feel a bud right there. So if I were to whack this right here, and prune thing. So, if I were to come in and do a reduction cut, I would cut right there, okay? What's going to happen to that limb? Okay? This tree is going to grow up here. It's going up, not out. Okay? So, if I wanted to make it grow out again, I could come in here. There's a bud right here. Do a prune. And then my next limb is going to be down like that. Okay? So, the point I really want to make is that the limbs, as they grow, wherever you cut it off, that's as it grows, that's where the limb will always stay. It won't grow any higher. That limb won't move up 6 inches. And then when you cut it off, when you terminate it, it's done. There are, along here, you can feel, there are a lot of buds along here. They're called dormant buds. And so if something were to happen and I were to whack this off here, these dormant buds would come back into service and create more growth, okay, to protect the tree. Okay, we're talking rejuvenation. I'm going to show you a shrub here in the next picture of what I would really want to do, but my wife would not let me, will not let me. But anyway, rejuvenation, basically you're trying to save the plant, you're trying to get it back, and it's a really hard cutback. You've got, it's done in the early spring, and then there's extensive where you really are taking them back. Blueberries, for example, you could do it if you have a blueberry shrub that's out of control. You know, it's 8 feet tall and you've got scraggly stuff. You can literally come and just cut the whole thing all the way to the ground. You wouldn't have blueberries until the next year, okay? But you could. That's considered a rejuvenation. All right, this is that. Remember we were talking about that porch, and what we're trying to do here is to screen the behind here, and what I think needs to happen is I need to go in here and do a rejuvenation cut and cut it all the way back to here. So basically it would free up that whole area right there. See, it's here, and I would do a rejuvenation. These are Nelly Stevens Hollies that really, in my opinion, I would prefer to have something else, but that's here. But my wife is not prepared to let, for 2 years to foresee, 2 years down the road, be able to cover that up, and she thinks it's just would look really bad. So, of course, we'll do what she wants. Okay. When you talk about pruning, there's different how you want to cut. You're looking at this is called the collar. Okay, can you see that collar? And what I like to do in a few minutes is I'm going to send around, or if you want, I'd like you to come up and take a look and see if you can identify these different pieces. This is the bark ridge right here. It's a line that kind of parallels. And when you make a cut, you want to have about a 45-degree angle from this line, 45-degree angle from this line, the branch bark ridge, to the cut, and it needs to be outside of the collar. Okay? This one where it's alive, it's a little bit harder to see the collar, but what happens is if you cut inside this, it will not heal. So it needs to be outside of that, and it needs to be at about a 45-degree angle from the bark ridge. Okay, there are some fabulous references. The general pruning technique, we talked about Barbara Fair, who is our tree pruning expert at the university. She has recently reviewed these. These are older manuals, but before you cut, tools that make the cut, and then how to prune specific plants, that's this one right here. It talks about, this one right here goes through and it tells you bloom time. Does it grow in old growth or new growth? Okay. It talks about the function, how they're used, and the key is down here. The primary feature, the fruit or the flower, and then when you need to prune. So this is a fabulous reference tool. If you don't know, and the reason I brought this up is because I've got hydrangeas up here. Okay, this one is talking about pruning in the winter. This one's talking about pruning in the summer. This one's talking about pruning in the winter. And this one's talking about pruning in the summer. So why do you think that is? And we go back to, okay, well, when does it flower? My mother, bless her, she said, I've got these hydrangeas that just will not bloom. She said, I'm going to rip them out. And I said, well, can I rip them out and I'll take them home? And she said, okay. And so I did. And I took pictures of these things, how beautiful they bloomed. And the second year, I didn't know this about pruning. And the second year, I had no blooms. I said, what in the world's going on? And then I realized, oh gosh, I pruned off the blooms before they bloomed out. So taking a look at this and understanding when plants bloom and how to understand the physiology of certain plants will save you a lot of time. Okay. When you have a branch that is very heavy, okay, you want to do, and you need to take it off as you begin to prune. You need to take the weight off of the plant before it becomes, before you do your final cut. So in this instance, they actually came in and they did a cut up here, and then they're coming down. They're using the hand pruners, and they're cutting to do the final cut here. Here, when you've got a larger tree and you're having to use a saw, pruning saw, okay? They're cutting it, a first cut here, so this is like a relief cut. And the way it works is when you cut, you're cutting on the bottom side. And then you go out past it, and then you cut on the top, okay? And as you cut on the top, what happens is the weight of the limb starts coming down and it will break, okay? But this relief cut prevents it from tearing down here. Okay, and I think I'm not sure if I've got a picture of that or not. Okay, we talked about the branch collar. The branch collar is what really protects the plant. And what happens is it calluses over, and this is the center of the limb. You cut outside the collar, and then it just kind of rolls in. Okay? I'm sorry, that's the same thing. Okay, here's an example. Okay, the first cut was down here. Okay, and the second cut was out here, further out, and you can see how it started to tear. It looks like it's tearing. Right there, it's splitting, and it's splitting up to that first cut. Okay, and once you've done that, then you do the final cut, which is to go back and clean up and cut like you're supposed to with the saw, to saw and cut it at the collar. Okay? And that's just showing, basically this is showing the 45-degree angle. Okay. Okay. Now, there's different angles, and you think about it. If you've got an angle, if you cut it straight off, what happens? Rain, water can set on top of it, cause disease and everything else because it's just not having a chance to dry. If it's too sharp, okay, there's a bud right there that you're trying to get to promote growth. And so if you cut it too sharp, the plant's going to dry out here. You'll notice this, at this angle, it's cutting it off where it's above parallel for or perpendicular for the bud itself, so it's not going to dry out. Okay, never make flush cuts, and this is an example. You can see the collar would have been out here. This is way into the collar, so this will never heal. It'll bleed, and you'll probably get disease.
You got to talk to my son.
I'd be glad to. I'm sorry about that. Okay, never use pruning paint or tar. Okay, what this does is if you do apply this, it promotes disease and insects. And so they have it out there. You know, I've been guilty of trying to use it before, but again, it actually inhibits the repair of the plant itself. So let nature do its own thing.
So don't put anything on.
Don't put anything on it. Just do the proper pruning, the cuts, and you'll be golden. Okay? Okay, now we're going to talk about my favorite thing, is tools. We've all seen saws. There's different kinds of saws. This is like a bow saw, a pruning saw. This really helps if you got something really big. It does it pretty quick. Used this saw to cut that tree down. It took me about 30 seconds. This one has much finer teeth. It only cuts when you pull. Okay. A lot of these you'll see that actually have a kind of a hook blade. Okay. The thing that I like about this one is it's folding, and so as I'm reaching into my tool bag, I don't get my hand caught on it. I'll pass that around. We already talked about these. Not used very often. Okay, let's talk about hand pruners first. Okay, this set is called an anvil pruning shears. And what you have is you've got a sharp blade on the top, and then you've got a flat surface here on the bottom, the anvil. It's kind of like a hammer, right? Well, if you feel it, I'm gonna pass this around. On this other tool, it's actually has like teeth on it. And what happens, so it doesn't slip around, but it also tears the bark. So these are not recommended.
So what are they used for?
Well, they still sell them. They do sell them, and people that don't know, I mean, they do serve a purpose to cut. If you're trying to do something. This is also an anvil set. This actually has a ratcheting head, so that it gives you more power if you don't have a lot of strength. I've got a big version of that here, but this is also an anvil head. So while I'm talking about that, I'm just going to go ahead and show you the large set. And this again is anvil. And what happens, you open it up and you put it on the branch and you start cutting. And then after you do that, it's got a tooth that moves up as you cut. And it's supposed to ratchet. Yeah, there it is. And it gets tighter so you can get more pressure on it. That's what and so that set of hand pruners is a ratcheting. It's a ratcheting like this. And if you try to cut something, I'm going to pass it around. Let me grab here. You want to try to hold that?
Sure.
So I can demonstrate this. Did you hear it ratchet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes, sir.
So did you see how that worked? So it's giving you a little bit more power to make your cut. Again, this is an anvil head, and again, it's not really recommended because it does damage the tree or whatever you're cutting. I'm sorry, say again?
I just said to her, that's the anvil, don't buy it.
That's right, don't buy it, that's right. Again, when you're going back to set of pruners, always look to see, can I repair it, can I replace it, can I replace the blade? If the answer is yes, I can replace the blade, or can I sharpen it, then that's high on my marks. And this one actually has a set of adjustments on it so that I can take it apart, change the blade, I can tighten it up, whatever I need to do, and I can also put a file on it. So I'll pass those around.
Did they make that ratchet feature in bypass pruners?
I haven't seen it. I mean, I saw this at the fair and I said, hey, at the fairgrounds in one of the tool shows, and I said, hey, I like that. I want to see what I can do with it. I broke it. They were guaranteed for life. I broke this one, and they replaced it. They said, don't come back. You replaced one, so don't come back. So this is the one I keep on my tool belt all the time. It's kind of fancy. It's a left-handed one. It's designed for left-handed people like I am. But the handle itself kind of swivels. The locking mechanism I find is always a really good function. I can grab it out and then pull it and it automatically unlocks. Okay, and then so it's one-handed basically to lock and unlock. And then I keep it into the sheath. One of the recommendations is anytime you have a pruner, you never ever want to stick it in your sheath, without locking it. Okay, and that's just for safety. And they have different ones that have the ability to double the pressure. Okay, for people that don't have such a strong grip, as you notice the handle length. Whenever you see them, you'll see small, medium, and large. I thought it was the jaw, but it's not. It's actually the hand width. This is for a lady. Gives you a little bit more leverage on it. But again, this is a repass. So I'm just going to leave that one open because it's when you close it, it's hard to open it back. Yeah, I love tools. If you don't know, I love tools. So one of the things that I bought this was because I thought, well, if I've got this, I can extend my handle. And I know I can, if I extend my handle, then I've got more leverage. I can cut stuff much higher up. But what I didn't think about is that to cut something higher up, that means I've got to open it much wider. Okay? So that's versus if I'm, my arms are that far apart versus, an extra 2 or 3 feet. So the extra length is not worth, the bang for the buck. These are Fiskars. I think I got these at Lowe's or Home Depot. I have problems with these because they twist. When I'm really cutting something, trying to put some pressure on it. And again, this is an anvil type, even though it looks like it's a repass. Okay, and you can see there's a little bit of a gap where the blade comes in. And so to me, if I were to go back and find one, I would probably find something like this. This is also a Fiskars. This one has additional leverage. You notice the gear system, okay? It lets me really get in there and put a large piece of wood in there, be able to cut. The limitations when you have the hand pruners are about 1/2 inch. You only want to cut about 1/2 inch because unless you're really, really strong, cut anything over 1/2 inch, you really, really have to put a lot of pressure on it. Then you need to go to this. And this is up to about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And if you've got to cut anything above that, then you really want to go to a saw. So. Okay, when to prune. The time to prune is when you need to. We talked about safety is critical. Some plants, they prefer to be pruned in the spring or the fall. We talked about that based on when to prune, based on this catalog. That's the safest thing to use. You don't want to go too late to prune because it does stress the plant. And as an example I gave you about the Crepe Myrtle, the disease, the insects came in and devastated all the Crepe Myrtles. When not to prune, late summer, no, I said late summer and fall. Now I'm not, let's see. And the reason they're recommended not to prune in the fall is because it stimulates growth going into the winter, and you may not have enough time for the plant to recover. Now they're talking really about heavy pruning. Certain plants really need to be pruned. That you're going to do any kind of heavy pruning, you prune them when they're dormant, such as fruit trees, blueberries, blackberries. The canes, you want to prune them when it's cold. Let's see. We already talked about that. Okay. Also wanted to mention, this is a fig tree. And if you'll notice here on the left, there is absolutely 0 fruit. Whereas here on the right, you can see it's loaded with figs. Any idea why? Any idea why?
Because you prune the left side when you shouldn't have.
Okay, well the left side, and that was, let me just tell you a little, the background. This is the right plant at the wrong place. It was actually taking up my planter. And so I decided that I'm going to move this plant. So I cut down the left side. I said I'm just going to take it out, and I'm going to take a couple of the plants. I'm going to propagate them and move them to another location. Well, I've got them moved, but the reason that there's no figs on the left side is I cut the shrub down, and figs only grow on 1-year-old wood. So this is last year's growth, and so the figs are actually producing on that, whereas this wood is all new growth. So again, pruning, understanding the physiology of the plants and when they produce is important. Okay. Who can tell me what this is? Beauty berry. Okay, it's a white beauty berry. Okay. When do you think that you would prune this guy? Okay. Now, it's got the fruit on it right now, right? So would I want to prune it going into the winter right now? Maybe not. If I want to keep the fruit until at least the fruit drops and the birds eat it or whatever, I want to keep that because it's an interest. But let me just tell you, the reason, I took the picture down. This section is actually this limb right here. And this plant was pretty much deadheaded all the way across right here because I moved it from another location last year. So the berries are growing on the new growth. Everything that you see from here up is new growth. Okay? So again, knowing the physiology is important.
So when do you trim it?
You have to look at the guide. I'm just kidding you. I pruned this in early spring. February, March is when I cut deadheaded that, so I could move it. Okay, we're just about done. Crepe Myrtles, we talked about Crepe Myrtle. Okay, when you look at the size of this shrub or this tree, okay, and here, you've got all that inner tree matter. Instead of going out here and whacking the top of it off, why not go in here and selectively remove some of this? There's a couple rules in terms of when you prune, how you prune. Okay, one of the rules is dead wood anytime. If you've got dead wood, cut it out. Any time of year, no problem. You want to cut anything that crosses back into the center, you want to take it out. Okay, and that's, you're talking when you're pruning in general. And that's with anything, okay? If it crosses back in the center, it's a crossover. If it's touching another limb, if it's rubbing, you want to take it out. Then thirdly, you want to look for aesthetics, and you want to trim it so that you're opening it up in the center so air can flow and circulate in. Tell me if this is okay. Okay. Now, would you believe that this is actually properly pruned? I'm just kidding. In Europe, this is called pollarding. Okay, it's a term for it where you're basically always taking it back. And I've seen, it's not Guest Road. What's the name of that road that runs parallel to Guest Road, just inside of Orange County? River Green, Pleasant Green, I think is. Well, anyway, there's a gentleman who basically cuts the top. It looks beautiful, absolutely. It looks fantastic. I would have said it's Crepe Myrtle, but it's not. It actually looks pretty good. But again, this goes back to, look at all that material that you could come in and prune out and leave it looking natural. Okay, some of the pests of Crepe Myrtle. You've got powdery mildews, you've got aphids, and then who knows what sooty mold is? What is sooty mold? And what causes it?
It's actually something getting it where it leaks out.
Okay, that's right. Okay, it's the aphids. This is the underside of this, and what happens are you've got insects that feed. And they're literally punching holes in it, and they're sucking out the chlorophyll. Well, what happens is, with a wound, it's just like when you scrape your knee, it kind of bleeds a little bit and kind of, creates an ooze. Well, that ooze drips down on either the leaf below it, or, and then the mold actually comes in and covers that. Now, if it's really, really bad like this, you can wash it off. You can use a power hose, just don't spray it too hard, but a little soap and water to wash it off, because the tree can't photosynthesize. It won't hurt the tree for the most part, but sooty mold is really pretty common around here. Choosing a Crepe Myrtles, there are different habits for Crepe Myrtles, and things you can do is there are some that are really small that don't grow very tall. Even though they say, you can look on the label, it says the maximum height is 10 feet. You might as well double it, okay, with any plant. Because if you put a plant where it wants to grow, it's going to do a lot better than the standard, okay, this is out front of museum or whatever. It's, they're not going to take real good care of it. They're going to, just basic management. But if you put it where it wants to, and we all love to fertilize, so they would do much better than what they tell you. Let's see. These are just some trees that are of interest. And then here's a list of trees that have poor wind resistance. Pecan, silver maple, Bradford pear. Who has Bradford pear in their house? Now, to me, that is almost a noxious weed, and the reason for that, it was highly encouraged, and it was a design plant. But what ended up happening is they didn't realize that the drupe actually can be carried by birds and dropped in the woods and populate everything. The wood has no value to it. It's very weak wood, and so it splits and breaks up. So, yeah. Okay, flowering dogwoods. Just some interesting. I'm trying to pass through because we need to get outside. Okay, what are your questions? Sir.
So in the book, they were talking about, shrub versus tree, and how sometimes there's the ones that are, it's a shrub, but it's kind of a semi-a tree. And there's that 12-foot tall distinction.
Right. Okay.
Is that just arbitrary, or is there?
That's kind of an arbitrary number. For example, fig.
Mm-hmm.
Fig shrub. Is it a fig tree or fig shrub? Okay. Well, mine is a shrub because I keep it low, and it's got multiple sprouts or whatever, multiple stems. I've got my next door neighbor has a tree because it was pruned so that it's a single stalk coming out, and the fruit is up here. So it's, even though it's not 12 feet tall or anything like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Question over here?
Yeah, that picture on the right, you showed that with another plant that you just removed it from the container and it was root bound.
Yes.
Would that one survive?
That's a really good question. You probably could make it survive. Here's something that my mother told me just recently, and I've never paid much attention to it, is when you go to somewhere like Home Depot and you see this sick pallet, these on-sale plants, if you're wanting to grow a plant, get the best plant you can buy with the money that you've got. Don't try to save something. Just, I had a client call me and said, I felt sorry for this tree, and seriously, I said, I felt sorry for this tree, and I'm trying to nurse it, but why would you do that? Why would you just, bring something in that's diseased or has root problems to begin with? So, if you find a plant like that, take it back. Take it back.
About the Rejuvenate cut.
Yep.
Can you do that at the lower petal? Can you cut that back?
You certainly can, but it depends on, are we talking evergreen, or are we talking?
Evergreen, and they're as big as
you've got to be very careful and take a look and read that when it talks specifically about pruning evergreens. There's do's and don'ts when you're talking about evergreens, and I tried to show you an example of that where I took that Crepe Myrtles back in. I don't know what it's going to look like. My wife was asking me, can we shape it a little bit? Can we reduce the size on that? I just don't think we're going to be able to do that. I know that I probably, I think it would look worse. It's probably better to just whack it off and start over.
Are there any resources or materials? I know that, for example, at the Briggs Garden, they were speaking of doing that like miniature orchard, and so that's like a more compact space, and so, would there be...
That question, you need to talk next week to Mark. He is the orchard king. Okay, if you've never been to Alamance to see their orchard that they've got there, oh my gosh. So he'll probably talk, I didn't get a chance to talk about how to sharpen these tools or anything like that, but what I did want to do is, I want to show you a couple quick tools. Is that okay? Okay. Water gauge, basically you screw this into the end of your hose, you turn it on, you see what your pressure is. We talked about your PSI at 70, the PSI here is 30, okay? This is a compression tester. It tells you compaction tester. Basically, you put, they've got two different tips that you put on it, one a smaller and a bigger tip, and you take it and you push down in the soil, and it penetrates everything, and I think it's 6 inches between the marks. And so what happens is you go and see how far down it is before you actually get, before your soil is really compact. So it's about $300, but it really does can provide some different information. How many of you have something like this? A pH moisture light meter? Okay. Don't get it. If you got one, throw it away because they're pretty much don't work. Okay. How many of you have something like this? Or let's see. Got another one somewhere. Here. Everybody's got a tool, right? The only reason I'm showing you this is because if you do much weeding, this is designed for a left-hander. You can really get in, and they make them left and right-handed. This is kind of a universal. The problem is, and the difference is the material. Look how much wood, how heavy is that? How much work can you do in one day, versus something like this is heavy. And if you want to take it outside and chop a little bit and see what you like, what you don't like, take a look at that. How many of you ever have to transfer water from a bucket or something, and you have to? Well, this is a revolutionary tool. It's like a hand pump. It's nothing but a piece of brass. It's got a ball in there. So you stick it in the water, and you just shake it up and down, and it pushes the water up the hose. And so it's I found this at that same tool sale whenever I bought that tool. How many of you are you? Sir?
The hose with the brass end on it, what is it actually called?
I don't, it's just a self-siphoning siphon, I'm not sure.
The other place you'll see that kind of thing is actually the aquarium section of a pet store. They have self-starting siphons where it's a ball pump basically instead, and so you can get pretty long lengths, but it's the same deal and it's a little bit easier to find maybe. Oh, my favorite. Sorry.
All right, I love tools. So anyway, this is nothing but a weed eater.
Oh my God, you're gonna.
That's weird.
He's going for it.
Yeah. and you can really get down to killing some weeds with this thing. I'm telling you. You've seen, they actually have the gas propane tank.
Those are Home Depot.
You think I'm joking, but I use this around our fence line, and I burn the weeds between us and the neighbor just to try to keep my weeds in my yard and out of his. But this is a great tool. This is called a hollow leg, and basically it's just a bag you put around your waist, and when you're weeding, you drop the weeds in it, okay? And then you take it and dump it.
Instead of carrying in a bucket like I do.
This is one of my favorites. It's called a weed bridge, okay? An uprooter is what they call it. And the way it works is if you've got a sapling, you put it around the sapling, okay? And then you lock it in place, and then you pull. And it pulls out sapling. I pulled out a sapling.
Oh, you're good.
Now, I probably wouldn't be able to pull this oak out, okay? But I would be able to pull out, anything from about, half an inch to larger, up to 2 inches, depending on what the wood is. But absolutely love it. The last thing that I didn't really talk about was, high reach. If you ever have to cut, this is a pruner. What happens is it's got a blade that is operated by a rope. It also is designed to have a saw blade, so I can reach up and saw. Now, the materials that I'm using, this one's fiberglass. I can extend it. It's pole extended up. I can reach up, I can drop this over, you know, and then pull. I can adjust the handle where it is. And I've taken off quite a number of high limbs with this. It does a really good job. But think about the material. Fiberglass is better. If you have electrical line and you accidentally cut that, you know, you've got a metal pole. You don't want to do that. Okay. You just don't want to do that, okay? So anyway, let me just tell you what we're going to do now. There's a couple things that we're going to do. We're going to step outside. We're going to take this bucket, and we're going to see how long it takes to fill up a 5-gallon bucket with the spray nozzle. Now, anytime that I have a spray nozzle at my house, I always put one of these control valves on it. And the reason I do that is so that I can turn the water off and I can change tips without having to do anything special, without having to go back and turn off the water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on this, and then we'll put this on the hose, and we'll see what our water pressure is, okay? And then we're going to test the bucket out. I've also dug a hole out there, already dug, and so we're going to see how long it takes for the water to disappear. We're going to pour that 5-gallon bucket in, and then we're going to plant this plant, okay? It won't take too long. We've only got about 15 minutes left, and so we're going to go is right out the side here. There's a hose bib just on the wall here. That's where we're going to meet up, okay? So I'll meet you up there in just a second.